Wait, no.
Oh.
No, we're just starting now. Good evening, everybody. This is the May meeting of the Park Hills Civic Association. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Our agenda this evening is an exciting one. We'll have two presentations from two good friends of the neighborhood. And then we'll have a sort of general conversation and talk about things that we can do as neighbors. Let's start by going around the screen and everybody introduce themselves and say what street they live on, starting with Gary Klauber.
I live on Bonifant, right on the corner of Dale Drive, and have been here for thousands of years, it seems.
Don Slater.
Don Slater, Lower Mansfield, where I have been for 15 years.
Okay, Jim Anderson.
I live on Fleetwood Terrace. Been here about 16 years.
Cheryl Gardner.
Hi, I live also on Fleetwood, up the hill from Jim, and I've been in this house for 39 years.
Wow, beat me. Carol Gilbert.
Hi, I live on Bonifant down by Wayne Place, and I've been here 20 years.
Thank you. Don Berkemeyer and Melanie, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, Don and Melanie, 420 Deerfield, 30-something years.
Thank you. Doreen Riley.
Hi, Doreen Riley. I am on Dale 315 right at Bonifant.
Okay. Lisa.
I'm Lisa. I live in downtown Silver Spring on Ripley Street.
All right. Christine Keck.
Hi, Christine Keck. I'm on Fleetwood Terrace also. Hello, my Fleetwood friends. And I've been here since 1999.
Hey, Chris, can I make you a co-host so you can admit people? Do you know how to do that?
I do know how to do that.
All right. You're making you a co-host. Thank you. Wendy, what's your name and where do you live?
Wendy Caswell, Dartmouth Avenue by the school.
Thank you very much. Maren Hill.
Hi, I'm Maren Hill, and I also live on Deerfield. Don and Melanie's next door neighbor, and I've been on Deerfield for 3 years now. And I also worked for Montgomery Planning Department, so resident and neighbor, and also here to support Lisa in her presentation on housing.
Debbie Goldberg.
So, I'm Debbie Goldberg. I live on Fleetwood Terrace, not quite, but almost halfway between Jim and Cheryl, and around the circle, I guess, from Christine. We've been here, what is this, 2021? So 20 years this summer.
Thank you for joining us. And Nina.
I'm driving, which is I don't have my camera on so that I actually can drive. This is Nina, and I live at 215 Dale Drive.
Thank you, Nina. Nina is our association treasurer. Carol's our association secretary. Cheryl is the association vice president, and I am currently the president of the Park Hill Civic Association. So without further ado, let's try to finish up by 9 o'clock. That's what we usually do when we have in-person meetings, and maybe we'll be able to do that again someday soon. Our first presentation from our neighbor, Jim Anderson, who is a committee chair of Friends of Sligo Creek, and he's going to talk about a real pet peeve of mine, which is invasive plants in the Sligo Creek watershed. And he has a PowerPoint, and I am going to try to share it. So how does that look? Can people see that PowerPoint?
Looks good.
Yes.
Okay, so Jim, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, Al. I've been involved in removing non-native invasive plants almost since I first moved here. And I got involved in the Weed Warrior program of the Montgomery County Parks through the Friends of Sligo Creek. And actually, the person that got me involved, I was down in the park removing English ivy, and my neighbor came over and remember that and told me that I'm not allowed to do that unless you become a weed warrior. And Debbie Goldberg is the one that told me that. Remember that, Debbie?
Do I have to admit to it?
Anyway, you're the one that got me involved in this.
Thank you, Debbie.
So anyway, as you walk through the parks, and most of Sligo Creek Park is really nice and green. But most of the plants you see there are not native, but are invasive, particularly the vines. We have a really a great number of invasive plants, porcelainberry. These were wisteria. You can buy these at the nurseries. So a lot of these invaders that came into our park came out of our yards. And the Weed Warrior program, if you're interested in removing invasive plants in the parks, you can contact weedwarrior.org. And they are now starting to train new weed warriors. So they just started that in the last few weeks. So one can become a certified weed warrior if you're so interested. Can I have the next slide? A lot of even though we talk about things in the park, if you go around our neighborhoods, you'll see a lot of these plants growing in our yards. And what we want to do is try to eliminate these. And it's not the work of the weed warriors to do this, but individual homeowners that live you're responsible for removing these plants. And the ones that I'm going to talk about tonight are really English ivy, which is really a big problem. You see that it's growing all over the place. And mile a minute. Mile a minute is an annual. But also we have Oriental bittersweet, wisteria, Asian clematis. That'll be blooming in the fall. It's a beautiful plant. It's got beautiful white flowers, but it's just becoming quite invasive. And Japanese honeysuckle and winter creeper. So next slide. Can I get the next one? Okay, thank you. Oops. We get the next one.
Working on it here. Working on it here.
Yeah. You just
wait.
Arrow it down.
Oh.
Okay. Besides the vines, we have various shrubs. Bush honeysuckle right around the area around the Park Hills area. Bush honeysuckle is one of the real big invaders. Wing euonymus, that's also called burning bush, is another name for it. Japanese barberry, also rose of Sharon, multiflora rose. And of course, some people have bamboo. And weed warriors are not supposed to even start handling that. They want more professional help. And then at the bottom, it says wineberry. Wineberry is really a raspberry. It was brought into this country. I understand it's sort of a breeding stock to help try to do resistance, but I don't know if it ever did any good or not. One of the things that below our house, along between Piney Branch and Wayne, we've removed an awful lot of bush honeysuckle. That was the big one. And what we have coming into our park now is spice bush. And in some areas, it's really become quite dense, and there's a lot of little ones. The deer will eat some of this, but they don't eat much of it. As a shrub, they'll maybe eat a branch, but then it comes back. So I'm not too worried about that. And I know I've got some bush honeysuckle in my yard that I haven't successfully removed yet. It's on a hillside, and I don't want to pull out the roots and cause erosion. So it's a kind of a slow process. The next one. These are some of the ground covers. This spring, if you're walking along in the park, particularly along the creek and the floodplains, the ground was just covered with a green leafed small plant with real bright yellow flowers. That's lesser celandine. 10, 15 years ago, you didn't see this around very much. But now it's the pervasive plant along the creek. And we don't quite understand how it spreads so rapidly. And this is one of the plants that weed warriors we can't do anything about. It spreads by seed, of course, and then it has little bulbules. And you have to dig them out, and you just never get them dug out. There are just hundreds of them. A few years ago, we were trying to eliminate this by using a flame, butane torches, but that didn't work. You had to burn it too many times in order to get it under control. But the plant that we're working on right now in the spring is garlic mustard. Garlic mustard is not garlic. It is a member of the mustard family. And this was, that's a native of Europe, Southeast Asia. But I imagine garlic mustard is probably brought over to this country as a food source. It has a high vitamin content. And it sure tastes like garlic, but to me, it has an aftertaste that I just can't stand. There's all kinds of recipes. You can go on the web to find recipes of how to use it. But if you've got this growing in your yard, and I'll have pictures of this a little bit later, you should remove it, pull it, try to get the whole root out, particularly get that the top part of the root out where it has all the buds on, so it doesn't regrow again in spring, in the summer. And once you pull it, don't put it in your own compost pile because it has seeds in it now, and your compost pile will not get hot enough to kill the seed. So put it in either in the trash or in the county's pickup for yard waste. The composting they do at the county gets very hot and will kill all the seed from the weeds. Okay, next one. I'll show you some pictures here. Okay, this is garlic mustard. It can grow from maybe 3 feet high, 4 feet high, down to just a couple of inches, and they'll be flowering. And you can see the flower stalk with the fruit on it has long sepals, And each sickle will have maybe 25 seeds in it. So each plant can produce thousands of seed. The seed can stay in the soil for and not germinate for at least 10 years, maybe longer. And so each year you'll send up more plants. So when we're trying to pull this out of the park, we try to get every plant, and of course we don't. So when you're pulling it in your yard, you'll want to try to get the plant out and put it in the county yard waste. Now, garlic mustard is what we call a biannual. It germinates one year, has to undergo a cold treatment the winter, and then the next year it'll bolt and produce flowers and seed. Sort of like winter wheat has to have a cold period. They put that in the fall and to get established, and then the winter wheat has to go to have that vernalization process in order to induce flowering next spring. The next slide will have a couple of picture of the flowers on it. It's not a very good one, but it's what I could find. Anyway, it's got a little white flower on it, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of these plants will almost look dead, and you'll find some will all of a sudden there'll be a flower bud coming out. So it's a little bit different than some of your other plants that once they die, they don't, once they flower, or once they set seed and mature, they don't flower again, but this one does. Like wheat, it's what they call monocarpic maturity, where once it starts ripening the fruit, the wheat, it won't flower. This one doesn't do that. The next one. Okay, this is a bad one. This is English ivy. You might recognize this tree. This is along the bridge along the creek by the parkway. Anyway, English ivy is interesting is that as it grows on the ground, it will not flower. Only after it starts growing up the tree and gets up maybe 20, 30 feet does it have a metamorphosis and start changing into a reproductive structure. And we want to prevent that. And of course, if you let this, the English ivy keep growing, it can overtake the tree and actually cover all the branches so that it can't carry out photosynthesis and can kill the tree. Also, it can, in a heavy snowstorm, can gather so much snow in it and ice that it can topple the tree. So you want to, if you've got it in your yard, you want to remove it. And the way you remove it, you go down to the base of the tree and just start cutting the stems. And don't try to pull the vine off the tree. As soon as you cut the stem, it won't allow water to go up and it'll dry off and eventually the leaves will fall off. But what I like to do is go down to the base and cut maybe, just not cut it, but take a little inch piece off so the stem can't go back together to the root and form and graft itself back together again. And this, once you start doing this, every few years you got to keep the ivy off the tree. We've done a pretty good job in the park, but it's starting to grow back again, and so it's one of these jobs that it's never ending. What we like to do is go down to the base of the tree, not only cut it, but then pull the roots out for about 1.5 feet away from the tree, so that you don't have more ivy climbing up in the very near future. Next slide. You can also grow up the side of your house. And again, here, you're better off just cutting it at the base and trying to get the root out. Don't try to pull the vines off the house, because what happens is the roots get into the mortar and the bricks and the concrete there, and it can cause quite a bit of damage to the house. You don't want to have that happen. Next slide. Some of us have our pets in the backyard. This is a fox that we've seen several times. I have a camera in the backyard, and we've seen this. And this is a couple years old that we saw that the fox had, I think, 3 kits. We saw the kits running around back there also on the camera. So it's a nice place to live to see the wildlife. And of course, we got a lot of raccoons around. Next slide. Another plant that you might have in your yard, and we have it in the park, is called Mila minute. It's also known as tear thumb or devil's thumb. It has, if you grab it by your bare hand, it has little cat claws, like barbs on the stem, and can really cut you. So you got to use your gloves. But probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, they introduced a biocontrol agent, a small weevil, to try to control this. Mila minute comes from Southeast Asia, and they found this a weevil that's very specific to Mila minute. Did a lot of experiments on it and finally released it. And they originally released it up in the northern part of, as far as Montgomery County is concerned, of the northern part of the county. And in just a couple of years, it was all through the county. And we got it down here. And you notice there's a couple of holes in the leaves. Can you get the next slide? And here you see a lot of holes in these leaves. And what the weevil does is lay eggs in the meristem of the plant. And when the eggs hatch, the little larvae come out. Now, the leaves, when they're forming in the meristem, are in a roll, real tight roll. So you'll see a hole in these things. It's almost, you can see some of them almost on opposite sides of the leaf that compare, and it's because they have been able to eat through that whole leaf there. Just one of the things that we've been trying to do in the park is to promote the growth of these weevils. The weevil will have about 3 lifespans during the course of the summer, 3 or 4. And then it'll drop back into the soil and survive the winter and come back again. Now, this picture here was taken this spring, just a couple of days ago, so they're quite active now. And what seems to be happening, if you get a big enough infestation, they'll attack the meristem enough where the flowers development will be retarded and it won't produce as much seed. So hopefully by allowing this weevil to really multiply, we can have a way of controlling this noxious weed. Yeah, just to give you an idea of what type of insect this is, how big it is, we've all seen the cicadas that are out right now. Can you get the next slide? There it is. That little spot on my hand. That's the weevil that is gonna hopefully control our mile a minute. It's a little teeny thing, but there's a lot of them out there. And this is it's feeds specifically on mile a minute. There's another plant that we don't have in here. Can I have the next slide? This is a plant that is growing in Sligo Creek Park. This is called wavy leaf basket grass. This comes from Asia again. But it was first found in the United States in Baltimore, up by the Patapsco Park. And this was a number of years ago, and they didn't do anything about it. Pretty soon it was just took over the whole park, and it's really kind of a disaster in some parts up there. And it's in Wheaton Regional Park, and we think it came into Sligo Creek, Sligo Park through Wheaton. And the only place we can find it right now is up north of University Boulevard along Arcola, on the northern part of Arcola at the most northern end of Sligo Creek Park. Now this produces a seed that's very sticky, and animals, when they go walk through it, when it's flowering, the seed will stick to it, and they can spread it all over. And what we found is that in quite a few of the yards up in this area, this stuff is growing, and we're trying to get the homeowners to control it. That has a stolon or it's an above ground stem that grows along the soil and sits down roots at all the nodes. And so one plant can produce a huge patch in 1 year. And we're up there actually this time of year trying to pull it so it doesn't get spread too violently up there. And if you want to, next slide, if you want to know a little more about this plant, yeah, you can go to this website. Yeah, this is from the DNR of Maryland. And that's all I've got, but a lot of these plants are in our yards, and it's up to us homeowners to try to take care of these. And particularly trees. I think we're going to lose some trees, I think, in our neighborhood if we don't not cut off the English ivy. There is a recent study down in Tacoma Park where they expect maybe to lose up to 5,000 of their trees because of English ivy if they don't take them, if they don't do something about it now. So that's all I've got, Al.
Thank you so much. I wanted to show people. Can you see this? Can you see this screen?
Yeah.
Right. Here's our agenda. Jim Anderson, Lisa Govoni, Purple Line Update, food trucks and ice cream. I just went around the neighborhood today and took pictures of these trees, and they're very problematic because, as Jim explained, they crush the trees, they deprive the tree of sunshine, and then the trees fall down. So this is actually in the Fleetwood section.
Yeah, right by the corner of Dale.
Right, and so these are probably street trees, and we should get the county to take down the vines, at least where they've got jurisdiction, and then maybe we can help some of our neighbors, like the picture on the left, deal with the vine invasion that they have next to their house, because that's just not That's just not good for not good for the tree, not good for the neighborhood. So
Project there for a quick second.
sure.
I know that house to be a rental. And I also know a house on Mansfield to be a rental that has a tremendous bamboo outbreak in the back. And I do think that that can be an issue because there's not a homeowner taking responsibility and the renter probably also doesn't take responsibility for that. And then that becomes the spreading issue that we're dealing with.
So we'll reach out to them. And that house on the left, is it vacant now, or is there somebody there?
No, there's somebody there.
No, I was going to say we could sneak in under cover of darkness and cut the vines, but maybe
I might be able to do that. There are 2 houses up from us, so we may be able to intervene there.
we might get shot, so we won't do that. But obviously, the one on the right, which is at the corner of Fleetwood and Dale Drive, is very problematic. I'm not sure if both of those trees start inside Aaron's yard or not, but he probably can use an intervention. I was hoping he was going to be on the call this evening. So Jim has told us how you attack it. You cut the vines if you can, just above the ground. And then an arborist told us on Saturday that you make another cut 6 inches higher so it doesn't reconnect or regrow. So please keep an eye out for English ivy. Out of all the ones that Jim described, it might be the easiest one to get under control. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to move on to our next presentation. Thank you so much, Jim. And anybody who's interested, we'll provide you with a link to become a weed warrior, because Montgomery Parks requires actually some pretty serious training. So you do things the right way and don't hurt yourself and don't hurt the park. Anything else you want to say about weed warriors, Jim?
No, we welcome all new weed warriors. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to bring people out that might think they're interested in weed warrior and can join us in the park removing invasive plants. We haven't been able to do that during COVID. So we can bring different groups out.
And then one of the things that we'd like to do as a civic association is encourage residents to plant new trees. And we've mentioned in this space before that Montgomery County offers a program called Tree Montgomery, where you get on a list, you get to pick a tree, and then the county will come out and plant it in the front of your house, the back of your house. And the best part about it is they'll take care of it for 2 years, making sure that it's cared for and watered. So Tree Montgomery, which is a program of the Department of Environmental Protection, is, if I'm remembering correctly, we'll send out information about that. Don, you know about that. Is that DEP or DOT?
No, that you're right. That is the DOT program is the street trees, the ones that are on the right of way by the curb. And if you're interested in a street tree, the guy to contact, his name is Brett Linkletter, and his email address is brett.linkletter, just like Art Linkletter, at montgomerycountymaryland.gov. And yeah, one of our neighbors, in fact, just got 2 street trees and got a Tree Montgomery tree up in their yard.
So we're going to encourage everybody to take advantage of that program.
Do we know what kind of trees they offer?
There's
a menu.
Basically got tall trees and short trees. And if your side of the street is the one with the wires, you get short trees as your options. If you're on the side with no wires, you get tall trees as your options. I had my neighbors who are on the other side with the wires, their street trees are a couple of red buds. On my side, where I have no wires, last year I got a chinkapin oak, which is a relatively tall tree.
Because we've lost a bunch of street trees, at least on Fleetwood, and I think on Mansfield as well.
Yeah, we've lost a bunch on Lower Mansfield.
Yeah, great to get those replaced.
If your tree gets marked for removal with the orange dot, the first thing you should do is ask them if they're really sure about it. You question it, make sure that they're sure about it. And if they are, then go ahead and get in the queue for a new tree. It'll take a while to happen, but if you request a new tree immediately, even before the old tree has been removed, it will move you up in the queue for stump removal and new tree planting. It makes a difference.
So we'll be sending that information around to everybody. Please, if you can, take advantage of it. It's a great program that's funded by fees that developers pay when they chop down trees on property that they're redeveloping. So some of us were involved in a program to get the fees put into a fund and then turned back to the neighborhood. So we'd like to see more people take advantage of that. And then Debbie, with regard to the street trees, we've been advocating for Montgomery County to come back and take out the stumps, because they can't replace the trees unless they take out the stumps. So
right. That's why you want to get in the queue for a new tree, because that will put you at the top of the queue for stump removal. And that's a budget dependent issue, because stump removal is all contract work.
Okay, that sounds.
This is Nina. I have two questions. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. For Dawn, for Jim and the Weed Warrior program, is this something that you ever go and present to schools? Because I can see how kids can get so interested in this. I don't know if there's a connection there. And also for the trees, is there, how long is the wait to get on the list to put trees on, to replant trees in your yard? And third thing, with the street trees, is that something that we can eventually use to advocate for replacement of trees that the Purple Line construction took out along Wayne?
There's really no linkage. I'm sorry, Jim, you want to go ahead and answer the school question?
Okay, we have been working with several schools in the park. But in the last, since COVID, we haven't been able to do that. But we do work with, we love to work with young people. And we always have something for them to do. So yes, we can work with school kids.
Let's have a special. Let's do a special program on trees. We can just make a Zoom recording and make it available to people in the neighborhood. With regard to your question, Nina, about the Purple Line, the trees on the Purple Line are going to be height restricted. That's why they took down the mature trees all along Wayne Avenue and all.
There's no linkage between the street tree program and the Purple Line tree removal.
No, I'm just saying that.
Your question about lead time, it's about a year, Nina.
There was something, I can't remember.
Thank you.
Recently, someone posted on the listserv about signing up for a tree. I think it was Chris. And I tried to do it and they said the reforest is done and the next time to sign up is in October. And then someone after that followed up on the listserv with something. If you missed that one, there was another way through the Arbor Day Foundation. And I actually went on there.
If you go to the Park and Planning website and look up trees, they have a coupon program where you can actually, it's a print yourself online coupon for like 40 or 50 bucks that you can then take to a nursery and get, that apply the coupon to buying a tree. That's a program that Park and Planning has. But the Tree Montgomery program, the DEP program, has been, that's free.
Right. They said it was free, in October. And then this other one, the Arbor Day one, I did go on and I did just 2 weeks ago, got a little red maple in the mail.
We got a bunch of reds through the Arbor Day thing a number of years ago. And it turned out of like 10 trees we got, like one of them survived.
Weeks ago, I haven't.
Oh, you just froze. We just lost our link to New Jersey.
Well, let's see. I want to bring the conversation about trees and invasive vines to conclusion and really move on to the next presentation from Lisa from Park and Planting. Marin was going to introduce you, Lisa, and having her unstable computer, she wants you to introduce yourself and then proceed with your presentation. It's 8:14. Hopefully we'll have a chance to ask some questions at the end. But thank you, Lisa. You've been a real soldier for the planning department, and you've stepped up and helped us every time we've asked. So I couldn't be happier, and thank you so much. So we'll do Lisa Govoni from Park and Planning.
Thanks, Alan. So I actually was just in your neighborhood yesterday. I picked up Marin for a baby shower, and I have to say, beautiful neighborhood, but I was also very impressed by the amount of cicadas that you guys have, because I don't have any in the downtown. I heard them in your neighborhood, and it was very impressive. So without Marin, I'll introduce myself. My name's Lisa Govoni, and I've been working at the planning department for the past 5 years, where I work primarily on housing policy. So tonight, I'll try to be brief. I cut some slides, so if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to email me and I can send you a link to our website. But here's a quick outline for tonight. So I'll explain what Attainable Housing Strategies is and provide a little bit of context for our work, highlighting previous and ongoing efforts at the planning department. I'll then explain what it means to be attainable housing and contrast it to affordable housing and missing middle housing. Then I'll talk to some high-level recommendations, which we really haven't put out there yet, so I'm excited to bring them to you. In short, the Attainable Housing Strategies is one in which the planning department is evaluating and refining proposals and developing recommendations to spur county. The project is perfectly aligned with the actions recommended in the planning board draft of Thrive Montgomery 2050, which, if you haven't heard of it, is a comprehensive update of the county's general plan, which creates policy guidance on topics like housing, land use, and transportation for the county over the next 30 years. Thrive is the result of multiple years of outreach, engagement, visioning, and policy discussions. Mining Tax Amendment, or ZTA 20-07, which is aimed at encouraging more diverse types of missing middle housing near transit. And shortly after that, Councilmember Hans Riemer circulated a draft ZTA focused on increasing housing options in our BRT corridors. After receiving comments from the planning board and more than 50 people testifying at the public hearing for ZTA 2007, the council decided to defer all actions on the ZTAs and requested that the planning board consider and recommend zoning reforms that would allow greater opportunities for missing middle housing in the county. The letter from the council also asked us to provide opportunity for public input in this process. After we received the council's request, the planning department responded by creating the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative. So an important point that I want to emphasize is that this is an effort by the planning department and the county to slow things down a little bit. The council was prepared to consider Councilmember Giwando's ZTA, but decided to give us some more time to consider other ideas and to engage the community. And so that's what we've been doing for the past couple of months. Through the Attainable Housing Strategies, we aim to identify viable options for more existing and future residents in the county and to find homes at the right sizes, location, and price points for their needs. A key opportunity is expanding home ownership in Montgomery County. So not just a focus on rental units, but for sale units that can provide communities with increased opportunities to build wealth. But given that Montgomery County with limited opportunities for greenfield development, this effort needs to be focused on growing our housing supply in places with limited available space. The point I want to make with all of this is that this slide is that there's a lot of context here. The Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative is part of an ongoing, extensive, multi-year effort by the county and the planning department to address housing. This includes several studies shown here, which evaluated different aspects of housing in the county. We've also adopted recent master plans with a particular focus on missing middle housing, which includes the Veersmill Plan and the Forest Glen Montgomery Hills Plan. In addition to those plans and studies, we have updated the moderately priced dwelling unit policy to require higher shares of affordable housing in areas of the county with higher income levels. We've made it easier to add accessory dwelling units for property owners on their properties. We've agreed to a set of housing targets for the county and the region as a whole. We've also created a new tax incentive program for residential development on WMATA sites. And we've adopted the growth and infrastructure policy, which eliminated the residential moratorium. And then this budget cycle, the council is taking up the HOC production fund, which will help produce more and new mixed income housing in the county. And last month, of course, I mentioned this, the planning board approved its draft of Thrive Montgomery 2050, which includes a focus on increasing the diversity of housing in our county to improve opportunities for more people. And all of these efforts here have been described as, pieces of the housing puzzle, with no one piece being the solution for our housing concerns. We need all pieces of the puzzle. And the product of this initiative is just one more piece of the puzzle, but certainly not the only piece. In many ways, Attainable Housing Strategies is the first opportunity to implement the housing vision that Thrive Montgomery set out. Thrive recommends several actions and policies to support the production of more housing and to plan for a wide range of housing to meet housing types and sizes to meet diverse needs. Given that all we've done already, given the recommendations in Thrive and given other similar efforts across the country, the council clearly believes that this is a ripe opportunity to develop a strategy and take action to diversify the county's housing stock. So how do we get to our recommendations? And the question before us is simply, how can we diversify and expand housing options in Montgomery County? Where should it be located? What needs to be changed to allow it to happen, and what needs to change to make it feasible or even likely to happen. This will require us to reassess our longstanding patterns of residential development in the county. We need to look at neighborhoods that have been exclusively zoned for single family, but we also want to understand our ability to densify our corridors with more diverse infill housing. And I also want to emphasize that at the root of this is an effort to make our communities more equitable and more inclusive by countering the historical discriminatory aspects of zoning. Zoning determines what can be built, where, and by limiting housing options, we have limited who has access to different neighborhoods. If we want to diversify our communities, we need to focus on diversifying our housing options. And jurisdictions and states all across the country, from California to Massachusetts and from Minnesota to Texas, are also pursuing efforts to undo the discriminatory impacts of zoning. But this, of course, is not easy given our entrenched development patterns. So what is attainable housing? The million-dollar question. Attainable housing or attainability is a relatively new term to both the housing policy world and for Montgomery planning. We have typically focused on the past on a measure of affordability, which is a measure on whether or not a household can afford to live in a dwelling unit and how much of their income goes to their housing costs. We recently introduced this concept of attainability in the housing chapter of Thrive Montgomery, where attainability is used in recognition that our housing needs go beyond a sole focus on affordability. Attainability is the ability of households of various incomes and sizes to obtain housing that is suitable for their needs. And this includes by type, location, tenure, and size. But to be clear, attainable housing is not income restricted housing like a moderately priced dwelling unit, but it will generally be more affordable than the typical new detached single family home due to its smaller size and smaller lot size. And a big part of attainable housing is missing middle housing, which generally refers to a range of housing types that are compatible in scale, form, and construction with single family homes, but include multiple housing units. Missing middle housing helps provide a transition from low density single family neighborhoods to high density apartment, retail, and office districts. And the best opportunities to create missing middle housing potentially includes changes to the single family zones in Montgomery County to allow these transition areas to allow missing middle housing production. But I want to be clear, the ideas that we are pursuing with this initiative will not eliminate single family neighborhoods. It may result in some single family homes being replaced in a compatible form if a property owner decides to take advantage of future zoning changes or if a developer combines multiple properties. The goal of this initiative is to allow Montgomery County residents to access more choices in their housing needs. So the crux of what we are considering relates to scale. You can see here that we have 3 scales, small, medium, and large, on which we are focusing. On either end of the attainable housing spectrum, you find structures that are similar to those just beyond the spectrum. For small scale, we are really talking about the traditional missing middle types of housing, which are house scale at 2 to 2.5 stories in height. And you see housing product like duplexes and other structures that are similar to that scale. Likewise, on the right, our large scale looks very similar to some structures that are outside the scale spectrum. The difference being that those outside the spectrum are 4-story townhouses, whereas those, a lot of boom, as those classified as large scale attainable housing types are stacked flats with 2 or 3 in each column. And we know attainable housing is a new term that we're using, and there's understandably been some confusion about where missing middle fits into this. But to be clear, attainable housing includes missing middle housing. Missing middle housing is a specific term coined by Opticos Design and is already defined in the housing world as house scale, small scale types of housing, like duplexes or triplex. But we're also looking at opportunities to densify our corridors, which may include a little bit denser of a product than the house scale. So attainable housing is that broader term that we're using to include also medium and large scale types and the house scale missing middle. So what I'm about to show you next is the making of planning staff's initial recommendations. Some things to keep in mind that these are really high level. At this point, we really want to get feedback from the community that we're having a community meeting next week, and I'll mention that at the end. But we still have a lot of details to work out. So keep in mind, this is a work in progress and we're still looking for feedback. So please don't take these as final. And then it's important to put this in with a process perspective. There's still a lot of process remaining over the next few weeks as we work to finalize our recommendations. So with that in mind, I'll introduce you to our preliminary high-level recommendations. Our first recommendation is to allow house scale duplexes and triplexes by right everywhere in the county in an R40, R60, R90, and R200 zone, and allow quadplexes closer to transit. However, we will require conformance, what we're calling a pattern book, which will be a tool of compatibility, which will dictate massing and scale for the product. Second, we'll create a new optional method of development for those middle and large scale types of product to encourage consolidation and higher densities near transit and along our growth corridors. If you don't know what the optional method of development is, it allows more flexibility in building size, placement, and unit types, and with often an increase in density in exchange for desired public benefits and site plan review to ensure compatibility and design review. The key thing to note here is that there is site plan review. It will require a level of discretionary review for the new optional method of development. And when we say growth corridors for where we're targeting this new optional method, these growth corridors were identified in Thrive Montgomery 2015, and they include several corridors planned for BRT through the 2013 Countywide Transit Corridors Functional Master Plan. It includes Georgia Avenue, Maryland 355, New Hampshire, Old Georgetown Road, Randolph Road, University Boulevard, US 29, and Veers Mill. But we're also considering adding Connecticut Avenue and River Road to our growth corridors as identified in Thrive Montgomery 2015. The next recommendation is generally to update existing residential zones and optional method of development to include the new housing types. In order to make these recommendations work, we have to add terms to our zoning code like multiplex, which is not currently defined in our zoning code. And then lastly, we are going to support more corridor-focused master plans to evaluate options for the highest level of density along our growth corridors. So this slide shows you the various efforts and where everything fits into the process and timeline-wise. Thrive has been transmitted to the County Council and will have 2 public hearings in June. Attainable Housing Strategies will also release its full recommendations a week after the first Thrive public hearing at the Council on the 24th. And we will have public testimony and work sessions at the Planning Board before we transmit any recommendations to the Council. And we expect to transmit our recommendations sometime in July. Thrive Montgomery will be taken up by the council before Attainable Housing Strategies. We expect Thrive to enter its work sessions in early fall and Attainable Housing Strategies after fall and late fall / early winter. In the letter to us, the council indicated that they would like to take action on Attainable Housing Strategies by the end of the year. And ZTA 2007 is currently on hold, waiting for our Attainable Housing recommendations. And so as we finalize this, as we end up, I want to share the timeline just for Attainable Housing Strategy, just talk a little bit about community engagement and when we have left. So next week on June 2nd, we will have our final community meeting to engage residents in discussions around our high-level recommendations. The very next day, we'll have virtual office hours for people that can't make the community meeting or just want to talk about the initiative. And then June 14th is when I will take over the planning department's social media to reach people through yet more venues. It's always been a dream of mine to get paid to be on Twitter. So I'm very excited for that. And with that, I think here's some ways to stay involved, and I can put a link to the website in the chats for people if they're interested to sign up for the community meeting.
Thank you, Lisa. Very informative presentation. As you said, there's lots of confusion about the missing middle product that discussed in the draft general plan. As Gwen Wright pointed out, there's a large housing discussion in the general plan, and only part of it is missing middle. But as you know, from our neighborhood, we are established single family R60 neighborhood. And so the high level recommendations and the lower recommendations can be very impactful for us. And wanted to make sure our neighbors had this recording and an opportunity to ask you some questions. So I'll ask you the first question. So if your wish list passed, would I, as a R60 homeowner, be able to subdivide my property so 2 or 3 families could live in the current structure?
That's a great question, and something that we're still talking about with our intake department on the ability to subdivide. We're thinking of potentially allowing sorry, it's a lot of thunder. We're thinking of potentially allowing an admin sub, which would basically go to the planning director's desk instead of the planning board, to allow subdivision for potentially duplexes and triplexes that are side by side. Obviously, you can't subdivide if it's a stacked triplex, but we're thinking about it. We don't have the answer right now, but we are in conversations to figure that out.
And then how extensive have been your investigations of the form book? As I understand it, somebody who wanted to increase the housing density on their property, they would go to a book and they would see what kind of design they liked, and then they would seek approval from some administrative function from the planning board?
I think that's a good way to describe it. So when we talk about the pattern book, one of the things that we kept hearing, this need for ability to the physical built form of the neighborhood is very important. Right now, we know, as you know, you can do a tear down by right. And so we wanted to make a process that's competitive to that by right process, but also has some form of compatibility control. And so we have a housing Martin's division, Mid-County Planning, will, after this is over, they have a group of urban designers that will work on it with that budget description to create that pattern book, but this would not be allowed. You would not be allowed to build attainable housing until after that pattern book is complete, and you can refer to it for the process.
Anybody have any other questions? I've got plenty, but if you've got questions about what might happen to your single family house under this plan, this is a good opportunity. There's a question in the chat from Gary Klauber. Is there a requirement, it disappeared, It's about,
I received.
is there a requirement for adequate parking for missing middle housing?
It depends on what you mean by adequate. There is a parking requirement for these structures. Right now, you are required to have 2 parking spots for a single family detached house for every unit. So we are cut it in half. So you would so if it was a duplex, you would be required a parking spot for each unit. So you would require 2 parking spots for that duplex unit. So there will be a parking requirement. It just won't be as large as it is today.
And I think that's going to be a problem because now pretty much every couple has 2 cars. So if it's even just a married couple living in one of these small units, they still fairly likely will have 2 cars each.
So I think that raises a related question that I wonder if you know about, Lisa, which is, it seems like if you are going to try and create more density to deal with parking issues that I think are endemic, or the concerns anyway are, you also need to think about transportation access. And I'm curious if you can just say a word about how the planning department is kind of coordinating around the housing side of the coin and the transportation side of the coin.
Sure, that's a great point. I think we are looking at growth corridors as identified by Thrive. We're looking at things like the purple line and the red line, but we're also looking at the BRT. The county put a huge investment into the BRT, and we're looking at ways to capitalize that with missing middle housing. I mentioned at the tail end of the recommendations where we're going to support what we're calling corridor master plans, which will look at opportunities to have that parcel level analysis for more density. So we are hoping to capitalize on transit as much as possible with this.
To minimize people's need to actually have 2 cars
Right.
per household or whatever in order to do their daily things.
Right.
Can I ask one other? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention is that it's a parking minimum. So we're requiring 1 spot, but that doesn't mean the developer can't build more. We've seen that a lot of developers in the suburban market will build 2 units, even if we tell them we only want you to build 1. So I think that that's an important thing to remember too, is that it's a parking minimum.
Great. So I was just going to ask, it seems to me that, when you make these land use changes that give permission to landowners to do different things than what has historically been permitted on that parcel of land, you don't know what you're actually going to get, right?
Right.
So just to take our street, Fleetwood Terrace, our houses are built to be perfectly suited to accessory dwelling units. Our basements, like where I'm sitting right now, I think Jim's house has essentially a separate unit in the basement. The house that maybe is next door to Cheryl, someone just redid with 2 units. It's like the design of the house is perfect for it, but we have like very few, right? And so how do you make sure, or what is the county thinking about in terms of, going beyond what could be permitted on a parcel of land to making sure that we're actually creating the kinds of housing that we need for the folks who, both live here now and want to live here in the future, like some of our children perhaps, right?
Right, that's a great point. And I'll compare it to the ADU update. So in 2013, ADUs were only allowed if you went special exception or conditional use, and we got very few. And then over the next 5 years, we incrementally updated the zoning, and now they're basically allowed by right with sizing requirements and some parking. And the first year that we updated after the 2018, we doubled the amount of ADU production that we had. So I think, I don't think we're going to see widespread transformation of missing middle or attainable housing overnight. I think change is incremental. I don't think we'll get eight as much as I would like to think otherwise. I think, we can also point to the city of Minneapolis, who got 3 triplex permits the year after they passed their missing middle law. So I think, it's important to keep expectations in check, but also just to keep refining and looking at your processes to make sure that, people that elected and want to do this can do this. And so that's something that we want to keep an eye on at the planning department.
And are there any, do you so typically right along the transit corridors, are you anticipating any kind of incentives for, building the kind of housing that the county needs?
So there's one that we haven't decided on. And so one of the things that we're toying around is is like a cap on unit size for single family detached, but you would, so like the cap would be 3,500, square feet. But if you build a duplex, you could get 4,000 square feet. So you could get 2,000 units. So a little bit of a unit size increase. I think that it would also help stop a lot of the tear down rebuilds that we're seeing in the county. We don't know, we haven't decided fully on that. We've got some feedback on that, but I think that's one that we're considering. We're also considering, processes to make the subdivision process a little bit earlier, like I told Alan, that can make homeownership more attainable, but still, work through our own processes.
Thank you.
It was nice to see you. I haven't seen you in so long.
So I've had some conversations about affordability. It comes up. Originally, the emphasis was on affordability. You've moved now to attainable as opposed to affordable. I think you just said that you don't expect to see landslide changes in the neighborhoods for some years. It could be many years. And I understand this is just part of the housing policy, but what's the thinking for really addressing the housing deficit and the need for tens of thousands of income restricted housing so people who've got ordinary jobs can afford a place to live if they can't afford someplace which is $750,000?
Sure, I don't think that's in the scope of this plan. The Attainable Housing really understands that we have a need for just more housing in general, and understanding that there is a need for market rate housing too. But I would also point to Thrive and say we have a lot of proposals in that document about income restricted affordable housing. One we're looking at is to allow income averaging. So we have an inclusionary zoning policy in Montgomery County, which 12.5 to 15% of all units are set aside as affordable to households earning 65 to 70% of the area median income, which is about $80,000 a year for a family of four. But there's ways to income average so that maybe half of those units are at 80% to meet the middle income, then half are at 50% to meet our lowest levels of affordability. So that's one thing that we're looking at. We also are looking at ways to increase the access to housing choice vouchers to allow more low-income tenants to find places to live. So I would say that this is, like I said, this is only a very small piece of that puzzle, but I hope that we can also push some of the other endeavors to really meet that need, because you're right, there's tens of thousands. The need is endless when we talk about our need for affordable housing.
You just cited an example where, talking about incentives, where you might go from 3,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet for a duplex on a regular R60 lot. What happens to the setbacks? What happens to the trees? What happens to stormwater when you go to 4,000 square feet on an R60?
So we're not recommending changing any of the setbacks. That was something that we heard pretty commonly throughout this, is that the setbacks are very important for the physical character of the neighborhood, and we respect that. I could say that wasn't my thing at the beginning, but I've been convinced by many people that live in a neighborhood, you would still have the same requirements for stormwater and tree removal, which if I understand, that's probably the hardest thing to reconcile, because from my understanding is when you do a tear down rebuild, there's no tree mitigation. And that's something that we've talked about looking at through the update of the growth and infrastructure policy, the new previously known as the subdivision staging policies, to look at the environmental infrastructure in this county. Because I think that, I just listened to this awesome presentation about invasive species, and I understand the importance that the environment has on this. So we understand your concern and we will be looking at it, but I don't have the answer today.
No, so we appreciate your evolution, the staff's evolution toward, sort of the community concerns over these many, many meetings. It is really one of the most positive aspects that I've seen. So if you stay on the footprint, how high can you go? That's different from the FAR, right?
Right. We're also not recommending any changes to height. So I think that the height limit for R60 is 35 feet, or is it 25? I don't remember. It's either 25 or 35, but whatever it is, we're not recommending any change to the height. I think the biggest change is we're requiring one less parking space as a minimum. That's the biggest change to development standards.
One of the other questions that's come up often is that if, I tend to agree with you that people are not going to sort of buy onto this in the very future. So my question really goes to what kind of additional infrastructure is a neighborhood going to need in terms of electricity, gas, and water if you increase the density in one of these in this typical S90 neighborhood?
I think that's one of the hardest things to figure out, because like you said, like this isn't something that's been built in Montgomery County successfully in the past. It's not even allowed. So the answer is like, we continually monitor. Like I said, we're thinking of pulling elements of this into the growth and infrastructure policy, which evaluates, for those that don't know, it evaluates infrastructure, usually schools and transportation, but you can also add in environment to those, to the growth and infrastructure policy. And so we have talked about, we need to evaluate that when through the growth and infrastructure policy.
This is Nina. You touched on a question I wanted to ask is, when you talk about infrastructure and this housing policy, are you already thinking about how this will or will not impact schools? Because the schools in this down county part of the area are already overcrowded. So if you add all this additional housing, what happens to schools and also other amenities as well?
Sure. So for schools, we complete student generation rates every 2 years, where we evaluate the impact of housing on infrastructure. And so we will do that. We have talked about potentially needing to parse out our missing middle types of housing if we get new development and kind of figure out the impact. Like I said, the struggle with that is we don't have a lot of missing middle, especially new missing middle in the county. So we can't quite say what the impact on the infrastructure schools will be, but I will tell you that we will monitor it, and that we will, if through the student generation rates and growth and infrastructure policy, we will catch any additional impacts on infrastructure.
I've got another question. So has the Purple Line alignment been designated as one of these transit routes that would come under the plan for changing the housing policy? Have you identified Purple Line yet? Because Wayne Avenue is, key to the alignment in our part of Silver Spring, and so it would affect our neighborhood.
Yes, we have, the Purple Line is part of the growth corridor type, includes the BRT, the Purple Line, and the Red Line.
Who's got more questions?
Can I ask, going back to the infrastructure, I mean, once it's been evaluated, once the schools or the grid or whatever has been evaluated, and that, let's say there are going to be more students than capacity, then what happens? That's what I've always wondered, because I have been in the county a long time, and there have been periods where we did have school overcrowding, and there really, besides putting some portables on the school property, there really was nothing. So, I mean, evaluation is one thing, but what kind of mitigation is available if, for example, the roads or the schools are not ready to keep up with what's coming?
Sure. So I can't speak for MCPS and their facility planning, but what I can tell you about is, I keep saying the growth and infrastructure policy, but we did just pass a new rule that if schools are overcrowded at 3 different tiers, I believe it's 105, 120, and 135, but don't quote me, but I know the first one's at 105. If a development wants to proceed, they have to pay more money than in impact taxes than they would have previously if the school is not crowded. So that's just one way that we're trying to get more additional revenue to the school. I can only speak from the planning side of what we do there. I can't really speak to the MCPS side, but I hope that helps and that there's some solace that there is increased funding to these overcrowded schools.
You know, one thing I can say about that is I have seen elsewhere studies that show that smaller units generate fewer kids. So, you know, the single family homes are more likely to have more kids in them than the smaller units because it's just, you know,
Yeah, that was one of the
you can't really fit your kids in,
was
a smaller units or so many kids in a smaller unit. So
that was one
it
of
may
the
not be as big a
policies
problem as
of the
people anticipate.
changing policy that was changed this year was that the greatest supplier of new children into schools is turnover in single family home neighborhoods. And certainly on Mansfield, in the past 10 years on Mansfield, have we seen that is the, you know, older people moving out and young people moving in and kids galore.
Yeah, I mean, that's cyclical. It's just that given, you know, and I realize missing middle is what we're going for here, but because of the high cost of housing in this area, I don't think we can automatically assume that people with kids are in single family houses and people in apartments aren't people with kids.
Well, I think that's a great point. I mean, Kathy, I will tell you that we do monitor this. So we know, like, MCPS gives us students, and I'm the one that does the student generation rate, so I can tell you, we match every single kid to a parcel, and we can tell you what type of parcel that is. So, for example, the school enrollment went down this year, so our student generation rates were impacted by the pandemic. But then we think that next year, when we do them again, well, if the students come back, we'll have more of an impact. I think the question is, we know the impact of new multifamily on schools is very minimal, that it is mostly turnover of single family homes. But because we are pushing the homeownership aspect of missing middle, and we don't have any new missing middle to calculate a student impact right now, I can't for sure tell you what the student generation rate will be or what the exact impact of missing middle housing will be on schools. But I will tell you that we will catch it because we monitor this every year, every 2 years. We do 2 years for student generation rates.
Lisa, I've got two.
Well, that's good to know.
Because I want to share some slides about some other civic association activities. My questions are, will there be a planning board public hearing on the zoning text amendments and the recommendations coming out of your advisory group? And second, we've seen over the course of the last year, the board overrule or change the recommendations from the planning department. Do you expect the planning board to overrule or modify your recommendations coming about attainable housing? And is there going to be another planning board public hearing on the zoning changes?
Sure. So we will be releasing a staff report on June 17th that will highlight all of our recommendations. We probably won't have the zoning text amendment attached, but we will put like a bulleted list and an extensive staff report of what those recommendations would be and what the ZTA would look like, primarily for the reason that you stated, is that the planning board can change our recommendations. And so we don't want to have a finalized zoning text amendment without having work sessions with the planning board. You're right, they can change our recommendations. They probably will change some of them, but I can only speak for staff right now. And so I hope not. I like our recommendations where they are so far, but we'll see.
We'll be rooting for you because the changes would probably not be favorable for some of our residents. And do you expect that there'd be a public hearing on that work from the planning board side on the?
Yes, the planning. So what will probably happen is when we get the planning board's recommendations, we'll write the zoning text amendment and we'll transmit it to council, and then the council will introduce it, and then it comes back to the planning board, and then there would be a public hearing on the zoning text amendment. So it's a little bit, there's a lot of process to go. There's a lot of public testimony to be heard. So we expect public testimony on the hearing and when the actual zoning text amendment is introduced, if when is.
That's at the planning department, because then after you have it goes to the council, comes back to you, there's a public hearing, then it goes back to the council for a public hearing.
Yes.
So we can expect that this won't happen with any conclusion until next year, 2022.
We think so we've heard, the letter said end of this year, but they still have to take up Thrive, and there's a lot of things on the calendar. So I would say either late this year or early next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Any last questions for our guest Lisa before we go to some slides and some other business?
So I had one.
Go ahead.
Real quick. It's just, I know I don't have details on this, but I'm sure you do. So I know that, I don't know, a year or so ago, maybe the council adopted some kind of policy around racial equity. And I'm just curious if these proposals will somehow go through a process to kind of try and understand what their impact on racial equity in terms of housing in the county might be.
I believe so. I believe the racial equity analysis is required for bills, but it will soon be required for zoning text amendments, which this will fall under. I believe that starts in September, but don't quote me. So I believe, but the way that our timing will work out is that, yes, it will be evaluated by the council, by Office of the Legislative Oversight's staff.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Lisa, very much for joining us in It's an important conversation. We will share your slides and links to the website so people can educate themselves and follow up with the several community-oriented events that you have coming up, including office hours and you taking over the Facebook page. That sounds kind of interesting. I want to see what that looks like.
Thanks, everyone. I'll put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, it's 8:56. I don't want to take up too much, but I do want to show you some more of these pictures. Screen sharing is posted. PowerPoint. Can you guys see that screen?
Mhm.
Yes?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. So there was these invasive plants pictures, then there was a Purple Line update. Did anybody go to the Purple Line update last night? So they had the Purple Line Community Advisory Team meeting last night at 6 o'clock on Teams. I was not able to get in, so I don't know what they spoke about. They will post the video at some point. Is there anybody who was on that call last night? So we don't know. So this is what it looks like. This is what it looked like this weekend. Well, on Friday, which is the backhoe and the cones and the single lane traffic and the flaggers. And so it's a mess, and it's going to be a mess for a while. So that's the Purple Line update, which is the state is moving ahead with the work that it can do. And they still have not picked an overall contractor, the concessionaire who's going to run it for the next 40 years when it's constructed. So we, at the corner of Wayne and Dale, it's been tagged with graffiti. We've been trying to get the Purple Line team to go off the graffiti. They said they needed the average temperature to be more than 40 degrees. We are there, but the graffiti is still there. We did report that to the Montgomery County Police Department. Purple Line, I want to thank, this is one of our most popular activities in the neighborhood, which is sweeping the creek. And we've already done it twice this year on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. These events are organized by Chris Richardson and with the help of Montgomery Parks. It was cold, but we had a good turnout. So Chris is not with us this evening. I just want to give him a shout out for the good work he did on MLK Jr. Day. And then on Earth Day, where we had another event in cooperation with the Friends of Sligo Creek and Montgomery Parks. And we got a good turnout. It was pandemic time, so everybody was wearing masks. These kids on the right, I don't know where they came from, but they were very enthusiastic with the amount of trash that they picked up. And as a general rule, I can just say that we've done a really good job of keeping our little piece of paradise clean between Wayne Avenue and Piney Branch Road. There wasn't that much stuff to pick up, so good for us. One of the things I mentioned in the agenda is that the executive committee of Cheryl, Carol, and Nina and I have been impressed with what other neighborhoods have been doing with food trucks during the pandemic and continuing into sort of the loosening. These are pictures from the IC Dream truck that came to our Lego event last fall. And we're going to reach out to Carol, who owns the Shaved Ice ice cream truck, and have her come back periodically during the summer over at the Nolte parking lot where the truck is pictured right now. We're also going to reach out to some food trucks and have them periodically join the neighborhood so we can support local businesses and provide another amenity for neighborhood. If anybody wants to help with the food trucks, scheduling them and inviting them and publicizing them, we could really use that. Are you raising your hand, Don? Don is not.
No, I've already got enough going on.
Don is not raising his hand. And then let's
now,
see.
when I'm done with the advisory board, then we can talk about it.
Okay, all right. The next thing, so expect this to happen in some form or another. It'd be nice to have at least the ice cream truck come by the neighborhood where Seven Oaks, East Silver Spring, and Park Hills can help this small business, which was started by Montgomery County teacher, I believe. And I think she might still be a teacher, and this is her side gig. So, good for her. Last thing I wanted to talk about before we conclude this evening is the Facebook page. So we have a Facebook page. We've had it for about 10 years. And I just wanted to ask you guys, it's right now at the public page with about 130, 120 members. We have the option of turning it into a private page. I'm wondering if people think that there'd be more use of the Facebook page if it was a private entity as opposed to a public page. Anybody have any comments on that? About any kind of change at all? One of our neighbors said we should change it to a private page. But we've got two neighborhoods that are adjacent to us, Sligo, Brandview, and Indian Spring. Indian Spring has got about 500 members and it is public. And Sligo Brandview's got about 500 members and it is private. So at least in those two cases, it didn't seem to make any difference. So we
May not be, Alan, but it may be what people are willing to have on it. For example, if you have events, people may not want their children pictured on a public page where anybody at all can clip those pictures and use them for any source, because some people are really sensitive about those things with good reason. And, so I don't know if it would make a difference in the numbers of people, but it might make a difference for the content.
No, I agree. And that was the concern this person on Mansfield raised about a year ago. And I'm just sort of getting around to sort of sharing it with, the group. To me, it doesn't really make any difference. But I was thinking that maybe there would be more content from other people if it was a private page and including some of those pictures. And maybe what we'll do is we'll post that question on Facebook and on the listserv and see what people say. Last but not least, you can find out more about the Civic Association on Facebook, the listserv, and on our website. We've successfully transitioned to the Groups.io. took the place of our Yahoo group. It's fairly active for people trying to, curb alerts and yard sales and pedestrian safety. We've had some pedestrian safety issues, and I guess there was a serious crash on Mansfield over the course of the last few weeks where a car turned over. Nobody was hurt, but
Well, it made it up onto its side.
no. So it didn't turn over, but it was on its side, which is pretty dramatic.
Yeah, one parked car was totaled.
No. So we need to keep an watchful eye out for that kind of thing. So it's 9:05, just over our allotted time. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share for the good of the order?
Say, Al, I'd just like to comment that Sligo Creek Golf Course, on Friday evenings, they're going to be having music again, starting June 4th and every Friday through into August.
So we must be loosening up. I'm one of the founders of the Sligo Creek Golf Association, so we want to encourage you to use that facility to golf. It's only 9 holes. It's kind of inexpensive. It's nearby. And as Jim just reminds us, they're going to have music and beer and food every Friday. And the music is pretty good. If you play golf, please use the Sligo Creek Golf Course. Any other announcements for the good of the order?
Alan, can I ask a quick question regarding trash pickup?
Sure.
Great photos and great initiatives through the Sweep the Creek organization. I walk my dog on a almost daily basis through the school infrastructure, Sims and Sligo Creek Elementary. There is always a tremendous amount of trash around there. I pick up a little bit every day, but is it objectionable for the school's perspective for me to organize a trash pickup on the school grounds? Is there a problem with that? Would they have a problem with that? Or is it okay to just go ahead and do something like that?
I'm sure we could just do something about it, but we should also give a heads up to the principals. Just as they started to redeploy and do more construction on the Purple Line, there was a lot of weeds and tall grass on the school property. And I sent a message to the principals and they had it cut down in a couple of days. So they might be really responsive to neighborhood concern about the blight and the look of the trash. I don't know if they would do it every day, but we should give them heads up that we're concerned about it. Maybe they will do it. I don't think they've got any problem with residents going through there with paper bags and picking up the bottles and trash. So please let us know about it so we can help if you do that.
Super, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Then all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, thank you guys. I will publish this video by tomorrow morning. So thank everybody for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.